According to multiple sources close to the events, Prince Harry, the man who burned his family to the ground for this woman, reportedly walked into a room and caught his wife in a moment so brazen and so deeply humiliating that even he could not look away. She was flirting, openly, aggressively, with David Foster, a married man, the host of the very event they were attending, a man whose wife, Catherine McPhee, was in the same building. And what David Foster allegedly said to Harry afterward was not diplomatic, it was not gentle, and it was not ambiguous. To understand what happened at that gala, you first need to understand the relationship between these two couples. This was not a random encounter. David Foster was one of the very first people to open his doors to Harry and Meghan when they fled to North America. When they abandoned the royal family in what was dubbed Megxit, they did not exactly have a network of genuine friends waiting for them. They had contacts, people who saw proximity to royalty as currency, and at the very top of that list was David Foster. He arranged for the Sussexes to stay at a stunning waterfront mansion. He facilitated introductions. He lent his credibility and his reputation. His wife, Catherine McPhee, went out of her way to make Meghan feel welcome. They treated Harry and Meghan not as celebrities to be managed, but as friends to be supported. But there is a pattern to Meghan Markle. She does not maintain friendships, she acquires people. She extracts value from them, and when they have served their purpose, she discards them. Jessica Mulroney, Priyanka Chopra, the Clooneys, even Oprah Winfrey. The list of people who were once in Meghan's inner circle and are now conspicuously absent is a casualty report. David Foster and Catherine McPhee were about to become the latest names on that list, but this time, the reason was something even Meghan's PR machine would struggle to spin. The gala was a high-profile black-tie affair attended by the elite of the entertainment industry and philanthropy. It was precisely the kind of event Meghan Markle lives for. Cameras, influential people, and an opportunity to be at the center of a room full of power. Harry was there in his usual capacity, as the plus one. The man who once commanded Apache helicopters now commands nothing more than the task of standing 3 feet behind his wife while she works a room. He did what he always does. He existed in Meghan's orbit while she gravitated toward whoever held the most social capital. And on this night, that was David Foster. Multiple sources allege that Meghan did not simply engage Foster in friendly conversation. She was flirting in a manner that was visible to other guests and deeply uncomfortable for Foster himself. She was doing this while Catherine McPhee, a woman who had been nothing but kind to her, was in the same room. According to these accounts, Harry walked into a space where Meghan and Foster were engaged in an interaction that went well beyond the boundaries of platonic conversation. The body language, the proximity, and the sustained attention Meghan directed at Foster were unmistakable. Imagine being Prince Harry in that situation. You have sacrificed your family, your country, your titles, and your reputation for this woman. You stood before the world and declared that she was worth all of it. You believed the narrative that she was a victim and that the two of you against the world was a love story for the ages. And then you walk into a room and see her doing that. According to reports, Harry did not cause a scene, but he did leave. He reportedly abandoned Meghan at the gala, leaving her to find her own way home, but the story gets darker. David Foster reportedly reached out to Harry afterward. The substance of what Foster allegedly communicated is consistent across multiple reports. He was blunt, he was unvarnished. He allegedly told Harry that Meghan had been hitting on him and that her behavior was aggressive. Then Foster reportedly used a word that no husband ever wants to hear. He allegedly told Harry that his wife had tried to get him to sleep with her. These are allegations, of course. None of the parties involved have issued formal comments. However, the absence of a denial is revealing. Meghan Markle is a woman who threatens leaction over stories far less damaging than this. Her silence on this matter is deafening. There is also the dimension of Catherine McPhee. Reports suggest Meghan did not just flirt. She actively attempted to block Catherine, physically and socially positioning herself to monopolize Foster's attention and exclude his wife. This is not charm. This is predatory social behavior that treats other women as irrelevances to be tuned out, while the real business of securing male influence is conducted. Catherine McPhee, who had trusted Meghan, was reportedly stunned by this calculated attempt to seduce her husband. Look at the pattern. Every friendship that ends in acrimony, every relationship that sours once it has served its purpose. At what point do we stop calling it bad luck? At what point do we stop blaming the media or the institution? The one constant in every single one of these situations is Meghan Markle. The fallout from this gala has been handled with strategic silence. In public, the relationship between the Sussexes and the Fosters has evaporated. There are no more joint appearances or cozy dinner party photos. David Foster and Catherine McPhee have cut the Sussexes out of their lives entirely. Unlike others Meghan has discarded, the Fosters cannot be easily silenced. David Foster is a powerful figure with relationships that span decades. He is under no obligation to protect Meghan. The question is not whether the full story will come out, but when. This incident reveals a marriage fracturing under the weight of accumulated deception. It leaves us with a prince who may finally be waking up to the reality that the woman he sacrificed everything for is not who she claimed to be. Before Harry there was Trevor Engelson. She married him, he helped her career, and when she no longer needed him, she reportedly sent back her wedding rings in the post. Then there was the royal family. The institution that welcomed her was eventually cast as the villain in her self-authored narrative of persecution. Then there were the friends like Jessica Mulroney and Nanaki Priddy, who both described a woman who is calculated and always has her eye on the prize. The common denominator is not racism or the British press, it is Meghan Markle. Criticizing her is not an attack on women or people of color. It is a specific critique of an individual whose behavior has been consistently destructive. The racism shield is a silencing tactic designed to prevent accountability, but it is wearing thin. People can see the wreckage trail that follows her. The conclusion many are drawing is that the royal family was right from the beginning. What happened recently at a high-stakes fundraiser gala in Canada wasn't just a social disaster. It was the final shattering of a carefully constructed illusion. For the first time, the whispers from the inner sanctum of the Hollywood elite aren't just about Meghan's ambition. They are about a level of brazen disrespect that has reportedly left Prince Harry reeling and his social circle in ruins. We are talking about the night Harry allegedly caught his wife red-handed in a pursuit so transparent and so desperate that it cost them their most valuable American alliance. To understand the gravity of this, you have to look at what David Foster represented to the Sussexes. He wasn't just another celebrity acquaintance. He was their gateway. He was the man who facilitated their stay in that multi-million-dollar Vancouver Island estate when they first fled the United Kingdom. He was the man whose wife, Catherine McPhee, had gone to school with Meghan, providing that thin veneer of old friend legitimacy that Meghan craves. Foster was a protector, a man with the kind of industry power that Harry, a man with no discernible skills other than being a former royal, desperately needed. But Meghan Markle does not see protectors. She sees targets, and at this fundraiser gala, the target was David Foster himself. According to sources on the ground, the Duchess of Sussex decided to treat a room full of philanthropists and industry titans to a display of social mountaineering that crossed every line of decency. Eyewitnesses describe a Meghan who was not acting as a supportive wife, dignified guest, but as a woman on the hunt for the next rung of the ladder. She wasn't just talking to Foster, she was by all accounts aggressively hitting on him. This wasn't a subtle flirtation. This was the kind of focused, predatory attention that Meghan has used throughout her career to move from one man of influence to the next. But there was one major obstacle in the room: Catherine McPhee. Catherine, the woman who had welcomed Meghan, who had shared her home and her husband's network, was suddenly being treated like an intruder in her own life. The reports are chillingly consistent. Meghan allegedly spent the evening attempting to physically and socially block Catherine from her own husband. It is a classic move from the Markle playbook: isolate the target, remove the competition, and dominate the space. But Catherine McPhee is not a quiet wallflower. She saw exactly what was happening. She saw the woman she had helped trying to seduce the man who provided the very lifestyle Meghan is so desperate to maintain. And then there was Harry. Harry, who has spent the last 4 years playing the role of the dutiful, wounded soldier, walking into a room only to see the woman he gave up a kingdom for throwing herself at his surrogate father. The betrayal wasn't just romantic, it was existential. If he couldn't trust her in a room full of their supposed friends, who could he trust her with? The climax of the evening didn't happen on the stage or during the speeches. It happened in the shadows of the gala, in a confrontation that will likely go down as the moment the Sussex marriage officially entered its terminal phase. Sources claim that when Harry finally confronted David Foster about what he had seen, he wasn't met with denials or apologies. He was met with the brutal, unvarnished truth. Foster, a man who has seen everything in the music industry, reportedly didn't mince words. He didn't care about royal titles or the Duchess's litigious reputation. The words allegedly spoken by Foster to Harry were a physical blow. "Your wife is a whore. She tried to get me to sleep with her." Let that sink in. This isn't the British press saying this. This isn't a royal expert speculating from a studio in London. This is the man who was arguably their closest ally in North America, a man who had seen the real Meghan up close, finally calling it what it was. For Harry, the realization must have been blinding. He didn't just lose a friend that night, he lost the last shred of his own dignity. He had spent years telling the world that Meghan was a paragon of virtue, a victim of a cruel system, only to have the most powerful man in his new life tell him that his wife was exactly what his family had warned him she was. The fallout was immediate. Harry did something he has never done before. He reportedly abandoned her. He left the gala, leaving Meghan to face the room she had just set on fire. It was a rare moment of backbone from a man who has seemed largely hollowed out since 2018, but the damage was done. The relationship with the Fosters and McPhees is not just strained, it is dead. The bridges aren't just burned, they are nuked. This incident tells us everything we need to know about the current state of the Sussexes' American dream. They didn't come to America to live a quiet life of service. They came to conquer Hollywood, and they are failing spectacularly because Meghan cannot help herself. She cannot play the long game. She is so consumed by the need for immediate validation and the acquisition of power that she is willing to torch the very people who are trying to help her. Look at the behavior at the gala. It wasn't just about Foster. It was about the blocking of Catherine McPhee. This is a recurring theme in Meghan's life, the inability to maintain relationships with women who might pose a threat to her status or her narrative. We saw it with the Princess of Wales. We saw it with her childhood friends, and now we see it with Catherine McPhee. Meghan views other women not as allies but as obstacles to be removed. It is a deeply insecure way to live, and it is ultimately self-defeating. By trying to hit on David Foster, Meghan wasn't just being inappropriate, she was being stupid. She was risking the one stable, powerful connection they had left for a moment of ego stroking. And in doing so, she showed Harry the one thing he couldn't ignore. He could ignore the bad press. He could ignore the falling poll numbers. He could even ignore his brother's pleas. But he couldn't ignore his wife being called out by his surrogate father for trying to break up a marriage in front of his very eyes. The silence from the Montecito camp since this event has been deafening. Usually when there is a negative story, the Sussex PR machine goes into overdrive with sweet nods and insider leaks about how happy they are. But there has been none of that. The silence suggests that for once, they don't have a counter-narrative. How do you spin your wife being accused of trying to seduce your mentor? How do you spin the fact that you walked out on her at a major charity event? This is the reality of life in the Markle orbit. It is a constant cycle of high drama, social climbing, and eventual abandonment. David Foster and Catherine McPhee were useful to Meghan when they were providing a mansion and a network. But the moment Meghan felt she could perhaps bypass Catherine and go straight to the source of the power, the man himself, she took the shot. She missed. And the price of that miss is the total isolation of the Duke and Duchess in a town that already had one foot out the door. For the audience in the UK and the Commonwealth, This story is a grim confirmation of everything they suspected. The British public saw through the performance early on. They saw the artifice. They saw the way Meghan looked at the cameras rather than the people she was supposedly helping. They saw the way she isolated Harry from the people who had protected him his entire life. To see it now playing out in the high-stakes world of Hollywood philanthropy is almost Shakespearean in its predictability. But for the American audience, this is a wake-up call. The fairy tale is over. What remains is a tawdry story of a social climber who reached too far and a prince who realized too late that he was the mark, not the partner. The real reason they fell out with the Fosters isn't about scheduling or different paths. It's about the fact that David and Catherine saw the mask fall, and they didn't like what was underneath. Meghan Markle is a woman who thrives on the hustle. But in Hollywood, there is a fine line between a hustler and a pariah. By allegedly attempting to seduce a man who had treated her like family while his wife stood by, Meghan didn't just cross that line, she erased it. She proved that there is no level of kindness that she will not exploit and no relationship she will not sacrifice for a moment of perceived advantage. And Harry is the ultimate victim of his own choice. He chose the spectacle, as Meghan once called their wedding. He chose the narrative of the persecuted hero. But as he stood in that Canadian gala, listening to David Foster tell him the truth about his wife, he must have realized that the spectacle is over. All that's left is the cold reality of a woman who is always looking for the next best thing, even if it's standing right in front of her. The gala was supposed to be a night of celebration, a night of giving back. Instead, it became the night the Sussexes truly lost Hollywood. You can recover from a bad movie deal. You can recover from a failed podcast, but you cannot recover from being the couple that people are afraid to invite to dinner because the wife might try to steal the husband and the husband might be too broken to stop it. The mask is gone. The surrogate father has spoken. The wife has been abandoned at the gala, and the world is finally seeing the Duchess of Sussex for exactly who she is. It isn't a pretty picture, and no amount of PR jam or Netflix documentaries is going to fix it. The truth has a way of coming out, and in the case of Meghan Markle, the truth is a wreckage of broken friendships and shattered trust that stretches from London to Los Angeles and now, all the way to Canada. It was a convenient narrative for Meghan, as it provided a bridge into the highest echelons of the North American entertainment industry. The Fosters didn't just provide friendship, they provided a shield. Catherine McPhee, Foster's wife, was the key to this alliance, having been a schoolmate of Meghan's. But as we have seen time and again, Meghan Markle does not view friendship as a reciprocal bond. She views it as a doorway. And once she is through the door, the person who opened it often finds themselves being pushed back out into the cold. At the fundraiser gala in Canada, the mask didn't just slip. It was allegedly thrown aside in a fit of brazen ambition. Sources close to the event describe a scene that felt less like a charity function and more like a hunt. Meghan Markle, according to witnesses, didn't spend the night acting as the supportive wife of a royal. Instead, she allegedly set her sights on David Foster with a focused intensity that left onlookers stunned. This wasn't about networking, it was, by all accounts, an aggressive attempt to hit on a married man who was not only her host but her husband's mentor. The most disturbing aspect of the night, however, wasn't just the alleged flirtation. It was the calculated disrespect shown toward Catherine McPhee. Multiple reports suggest that Meghan spent the evening systematically blocking Catherine. In the high-velocity world of Hollywood social maneuvering, blocking is a specific tactic where one person physically and socially isolates their target from their partner. Meghan allegedly positioned herself to ensure that Catherine was excluded from conversations with her own husband, creating a private bubble where she could apply her particular brand of charm to Foster without interruption. It was a display of social dominance that was as cruel as it was transparent, but Harry was watching. The man who has been portrayed as the handbag-carrying husband, the silent partner in the Meghan Markle show, reportedly reached his breaking point. Imagine the scene. A man who has traded his birthright for a new life, only to walk into a room and see his wife treating his mentor like a potential conquest, while his wife's supposed friend is being humiliated in the corner. The tension allegedly boiled over when Harry confronted David Foster. But if Harry expected a polite denial or typical Hollywood deflection, he was sorely mistaken. David Foster is not a man who needs to play the Sussex PR game. He is a multi-Grammy-winning legend with a reputation for being direct. When Harry allegedly questioned him about Meghan's behavior, Foster didn't hold back. According to sources that have sent shockwaves through the royal commentary community, Foster looked Harry in the eye and delivered a verdict that was as brutal as it was final. Foster reportedly told the prince, "Your wife is a whore. She tried to get me to sleep with her. There is no coming back from that. There is no sweet nod or strategic leak to People magazine that can fix a rupture of that magnitude. When your most powerful ally in America uses language that visceral to describe your wife, the game is over." The fallout was instantaneous. Harry, in a rare display of individual agency, reportedly abandoned Meghan at the gala. He left the venue, leaving her to deal with the wreckage of the social circle she had just incinerated. The man who once said, "What Meghan wants, Meghan gets," apparently decided that what Meghan wanted that night was a bridge too far. This incident provides the real reason why the Sussexes have been conspicuously absent from the Foster-McPhee social circle ever since. The friendship didn't just fizzle out due to busy schedules. It exploded because Meghan Markle allegedly attempted to treat a surrogate father figure like a career stepping stone, showing a total lack of regard for the sanctity of his marriage or the feelings of his wife. It is a pattern we have seen repeatedly. The Princess of Wales, Jessica Mulroney, and now Catherine McPhee. Meghan seems to view other women as competitors to be neutralized rather than peers to be respected. For the British public and the Commonwealth, this story is a grim confirmation of the Markle effect, the phenomenon where every relationship Meghan touches eventually turns to ash. The skepticism that has followed her since the wedding in 2018 has always been rooted in the observation of her patterns. People saw how she treated her own father. They saw how she treated the staff at Kensington Palace. They saw the Sussex Survivors Club of former employees who were left traumatized by her management style. The gala incident is simply the latest, and perhaps most tawdry, example of this behavior playing out in a new setting. But for the American audience, the stakes are different. In Hollywood, your reputation is your currency. If you are known as the woman who hits on her friends' husbands at charity events, you are social poison. The Fosters were the Sussexes' strongest link to genuine Hollywood royalty. By allegedly alienating them in such a spectacular and offensive fashion, Meghan has effectively cut off the branch she was sitting on. You can launch all the lifestyle brands and jam lines you want, but if the power players in your own neighborhood won't let you through the door, your brand is dead in the water. The psychological toll on Harry must be immense. He is a man who was raised with a deep sense of protocol and dignity, however much he has rebelled against it lately. To be told by a man he respected that his wife had propositioned him is a humiliation that goes beyond tabloid gossip. It strikes at the very heart of the identity Harry has built for himself as Meghan's protector. How can you protect a woman who is allegedly the aggressor in such a sordid scenario? The red-handed nature of this encounter is what makes it so damaging. This wasn't a rumor started by a distant relative or a disgruntled ex-employee. This was a direct interaction witnessed by the participants and reported by those in the room. The image of Meghan hitting on David Foster while blocking Catherine McPhee is an image that will define this era of her life. It reveals the predatory nature of her social climbing, a process that requires the constant acquisition of new, more powerful men and the disposal of the women who stand in her way. The A-list birthday parties they aren't invited to, the award ceremonies where they are the punchline, and the silence from former friends like the Obamas and the Clooneys. The gala incident explains the why. People aren't just tired of the complaining, they are wary of the character. They see a woman who allegedly tried to seduce her host and a husband who was left to pick up the pieces of his shattered dignity. Ultimately, the story of the Canadian gala is a cautionary tale about the limits of performance. Meghan Markle can play the role of the Duchess, the humanitarian and the devoted wife on camera, but in the unscripted moments of a high-pressure social event, the true self emerges. And if the reports are true, the true self is someone who is willing to gamble her marriage and her reputation for a moment of influence. What occurred at that gala was not a mere misunderstanding. It was, according to those in attendance, a masterclass in predatory social climbing. Meghan Markle has often been accused of men baiting, the act of using calculated charm to secure the attention of powerful men while ignoring or sidelining their wives. But at this particular event, the target was David Foster, a man Harry had publicly referred to as a surrogate father. The irony is as thick as it is tragic. While Harry was reportedly basking in the warmth of a man he thought was a mentor, Meghan was allegedly busy trying to turn that mentor into her next conquest. Eyewitnesses describe a scene that was uncomfortable for everyone involved. Meghan didn't just engage with Foster, she reportedly hit on him with a brazenness that shocked the room. This wasn't the behavior of a duchess. It was the behavior of a woman who has spent her entire life navigating social hierarchies through the men she can influence. But the most revealing part of the evening was the reported blocking of Catherine McPhee. Witnesses claim Meghan deliberately positioned herself to exclude Catherine from conversations with her own husband. Imagine the audacity, being a guest in a country facilitated by this couple, at an event hosted by this couple, and then attempting to socially erase the wife so you can flirt with the husband. Catherine McPhee had been Meghan's biggest champion. She had defended her in the press, shared her own platform to boost Meghan's image, and facilitated the very connections the Sussexes now rely on. To be blocked by the woman you helped, to see her hitting on your husband in plain sight, is a betrayal of the highest order. But the climax of the night happened when the music stopped and the reality set in. According to sources that have sent tremors through the Hollywood social circuit, Prince Harry eventually caught Meghan red-handed in the middle of this inappropriate display. The confrontation that followed is the stuff of Hollywood nightmares. Harry, seeking clarity from the man he trusted, was reportedly met with a truth so blunt it likely shattered whatever was left of his pride. David Foster is a man who has spent 50 years at the top of a brutal industry. He has no need to lie and no patience for games. When Harry approached him, Foster allegedly didn't hold back. He reportedly told the prince in no uncertain terms, "Your wife is a whore. She tried to get me to sleep with her." For Harry, this wasn't just an insult to his wife, it was a total indictment of his judgment. He has spent years telling his family, his friends, and the global public that Meghan is a victim of misconscious and media cruelty. To have a man he looks up to, a man who had been his primary support system in the Americas, tell him that his wife had actively tried to seduce him, is a moment of total psychological collapse. It explains why Harry reportedly abandoned Meghan at the gala, leaving her to face the fallout alone. It was the first time the prince had to face the fact that the protective bubble he built around Meghan was actually a cage that kept him from seeing who she really was. The fallout from this Canadian gala disaster is the reason the Fosters and the Sussexes are no longer seen together. There were no amicable partings. There were no joint statements about remaining friends. There was only a sudden, deafening silence. David Foster and Catherine McPhee didn't just stop calling, they reportedly cut them off entirely. In the world of the ultra-wealthy, you can be a lot of things. You can be difficult, you can be demanding, you can even be a bit of a diva. But you cannot be the woman who tries to sleep with the man who is helping your husband find his feet. This incident highlights the Markle pattern in its most clinical form. Meghan arrives, she extracts, she attempts to dominate, and she discards. She extracted the house and the network from the Fosters, and then she attempted to dominate David Foster by sidelining his wife. The only difference this time was that she got caught. She got caught by the husband she claims to adore, and she got called out by the man she tried to manipulate. The blocking of Catherine McPhee is particularly telling. It shows a woman who views other women as mere obstacles to the source of power. It is the same behavior we saw with the royal family. the attempt to isolate Harry from the Queen, from William, and from Kate so that she could be the sole arbiter of his reality. The problem for Meghan is that David Foster doesn't live in a palace where never complain, never explain is the rule. He lives in the real world, and in the real world, if someone tries to blow up your marriage, you tell people. The red-handed flirtation has become the talk of the town, and it has left the Sussexes more isolated than ever. If you can't be trusted at a charity gala with your friends, where can you be trusted? This is why the A-list has backed away. They aren't afraid of the drama, they are afraid of the lack of character. Harry is now left in a devastating position. He has burned every bridge back to London. He has no relationship with the brother who warned him about Meghan's calculated nature. He has no relationship with the father who supported him for decades. And now, he has lost the surrogate father who was supposed to be his new anchor. He is stranded in Montecito with a woman who allegedly tried to get David Foster to sleep with her while he was in the next room. The humiliation is total. Meghan Markle thought she could play by her own rules in a world where loyalty still matters. She thought she could block a woman like Catherine McPhee and get away with it because she has a title. But a title doesn't give you a license to be a predator. David Foster's alleged words to Harry, "Your wife is a whore," represent the final verdict of the American elite. They have seen the performance, they have seen the hustle, and they have decided they want no part of it. As Harry and Meghan's world continues to shrink, the memory of that night in Canada will haunt them. It was the night the Duchess of Success became the Duchess of Scandal in the eyes of the people who mattered most. It was the night Harry had to look at his wife and see the woman his family had tried to warn him about. The mask is gone. David Foster didn't just know Harry, he looked after him. He was the one who facilitated the Sussexes' initial sanctuary in Canada, providing the physical and social space for them to plot their exit from the royal family. Catherine McPhee was the bridge, the old-school friend, who gave Meghan a sense of belonging in a world where she was otherwise a stranger. But the Markle effect is a corrosive thing. It doesn't just change relationships, it dissolves them. According to sources within the high-end philanthropic circuit, Meghan Markle's behavior at a Foster-hosted fundraiser gala was the moment the bridge didn't just break, it was intentionally detonated. The allegations coming out of that night describe a Meghan Markle who had become intoxicated by her own perceived power. Witnesses claim the Duchess didn't spend the night as a grateful guest or a dignitary, she spent it as a huntress. She allegedly set her sights on David Foster, the host, the mentor, and the married man who had given her everything. This wasn't a subtle charm offensive. This was, by all accounts, a brazen attempt to hit on Foster in a manner that was both public and predatory. The most chilling detail, however, was her treatment of Catherine McPhee. Reports suggest Meghan spent the evening blocking Catherine, literally and figuratively inserting herself between the husband and wife to ensure she had his undivided, focused attention. It is a specific kind of arrogance to walk into another woman's event and try to erase her in front of her own husband. But for Meghan, this allegedly wasn't about affection, it was about acquisition. David Foster was the source of the influence, the man with the keys to the kingdom, and in Meghan's worldview, the wife was simply an obstacle to be bypassed. But Catherine McPhee is not a woman who can be easily sidelined, and David Foster is not a man who is easily manipulated by amateur dramatics. The situation reached a boiling point when Prince Harry, who had been witnessing the discomfort in the room, reportedly walked in on a moment that was so undeniable he was forced to confront the reality he had spent years avoiding. The confrontation between Harry and Foster is where the story turns from a social scandal into a total character assassination. According to insiders, Harry, perhaps hoping for a misunderstanding, approached Foster about his wife's behavior. But Foster, a man who has navigated the shark-infested waters of the music industry for decades, gave him no quarter. He didn't offer a polite excuse. He didn't try to protect Harry's feelings. He reportedly looked the prince in the eye and delivered a verdict that was like a physical blow to the gut. Foster allegedly told Harry, "Your wife is a whore. She tried to get me to sleep with her." Use of such a visceral, unforgiving word suggests a level of provocation that goes far beyond simple flirting. It suggests a woman who had crossed every line of social and moral decency. For Harry, the man who has marketed himself as the ultimate protector of his wife, to be told by his mentor that his wife was the aggressor in a sordid attempt at infidelity is a humiliation that transcends the tabloid press. It is a personal and public shamming that explains why Harry reportedly abandoned Meghan at the gala, leaving her to fend for herself as he fled the venue. The man who once claimed to be her shield was finally forced to see that the person he was shielding the world from was, in fact, the woman standing right next to him. This is the real reason why the surrogate father and the old-school friend have vanished from the Sussexes' life. You don't recover from a moment where your mentor calls your wife a whore to your face. You don't recover from a night where you are caught red-handed, trying to dismantle a friend's marriage for a moment of ego gratification. The Fosters didn't just distance themselves. They reportedly cut the cord with a surgical precision that has left the Sussexes socially adrift. In the upper reaches of Hollywood and Canadian society, loyalty and discretion are the only real currencies. By allegedly attempting to seduce the man who was helping them, Meghan proved she had neither. The pattern is now impossible to ignore. From the discarding of her own family to the systematic alienation of the British royals, and now to the incineration of her most vital American alliances, Meghan Markle's trail is one of broken promises and betrayed trust. The blocking of Catherine McPhee is particularly emblematic of her approach to other women. Whether it's the Princess of Wales or a music producer's wife, Meghan seems unable to tolerate any woman who shares the spotlight or possesses the influence she craves. She doesn't want to be part of a circle. She wants to be the center of the universe, and everyone else is merely a satellite to be discarded when their orbit becomes inconvenient. For the audience in the UK and the Commonwealth, this story serves as a final, grim, "I told you so." The British public, with their inherent sense of fair play and their deep understanding of social dynamics, saw through the performance early on. They saw the way she looked at Harry not as a partner, but as a prize. They saw the way she treated the institution not as a service, but as a launch pad. To see her now allegedly hitting on her host at a charity gala is the logical conclusion of a life spent climbing the social ladder with no regard for who she steps on along the way. But for Harry, the tragedy is complete. He is a man without a country, without a family, and now, without the friends who were supposed to be his new foundation. He is left with a woman who allegedly tried to replace him with a more powerful version of himself the moment he wasn't looking. The red-handed flirtation in Canada wasn't just a mistake, it was a revelation. It revealed the emptiness of the Sussex brand and the predatory nature of the woman behind it. David Foster's alleged words weren't just an insult. They were a diagnosis of a marriage built on a foundation of sand. The Fosters were the ultimate test of their social viability, and they failed it in the most tawdry way possible. You can buy PR, you can buy awards, and you can buy followers, but you cannot buy the respect of people who have seen you for who you really are. The gala in Canada was the night the music died for Harry and Meghan, leaving the prince to wonder if the kingdom he gave up was worth the woman who allegedly tried to give herself to the first powerful man she could find. When they were at their most vulnerable, fleeing the UK, David Foster and his wife Catherine McPhee didn't just offer sympathy, they offered a life. They arranged the multi-million-dollar sanctuary on Vancouver Island. They opened their Rolodex. They treated the Sussexes like family. But for Meghan Markle, family is often a temporary concept, useful only until a bigger opportunity presents itself. According to several attendees at a high-profile fundraiser gala hosted by Foster, Meghan decided that the surrogate father was actually her next logical target for social and romantic influence. The allegations are stunning in their directness. Witnesses claim that throughout the evening, Meghan Markle did not behave like a devoted wife or a visiting royal. Instead, she allegedly engaged in a persistent, aggressive attempt to hit on David Foster. This wasn't a subtle charm offensive. It was a display of focused seduction directed at a man who was not only her host but her husband's primary mentor. But the behavior went beyond the flirtation. Multiple sources report that Meghan was seen blocking Catherine McPhee, physically and socially angling herself to prevent Catherine from interacting with her own husband. It was a cold-blooded attempt to isolate the source of power from his own wife in a room full of their peers. Imagine the psychology required to attempt this. You are a guest in a home and a social circle provided by a woman who considers you a friend, and yet you spend the evening trying to seduce her husband, while literally pushing her out of the conversation. It is a level of social sociopathy that left the room in a state of shock. But the real explosion occurred when Harry, who had reportedly been growing increasingly distressed by his wife's behavior, confronted David Foster about the situation. If Harry expected a polite excuse to save face, he was met with the blunt force of reality. David Foster is a man who has managed the biggest egos in music for half a century. He is not intimidated by a title. According to those privy to the fallout, Foster didn't mince words. He reportedly told Harry in a moment of visceral honesty, "Your wife is a whore. She tried to get me to sleep with her." Those 8 words represent the total destruction of the Sussexes' social standing in the elite North American circuit. For Harry, the man who has marketed himself as a feminist and the protector of his wife's virtue, to be told by his mentor that his wife had actively tried to solicit an affair is a humiliation beyond repair. It explains the reports that Harry abandoned Meghan at the gala, fleeing the event in a state of shock and leaving her to find her own way back to their temporary residence. The man who had abandoned his own father for Meghan was suddenly faced with the fact that his surrogate father found his wife's character to be utterly reprehensible. This is the real reason the public has seen a total freeze in the relationship between the Sussexes and the Fosters. It wasn't a drifting apart. It was a total scorched-earth termination of contact. Catherine McPhee, who had been Meghan's most vocal defender in Hollywood, was reportedly left devastated by the betrayal. To have a friend attempt to block you and seduce your husband at your own fundraiser is a wound that does not heal. The Fosters didn't just stop hanging out with the Sussexes, they effectively blacklisted them from the very circles they had worked so hard to introduce them to. The pattern here is unmistakable. From the systematic alienation of the royal family to the discarding of every best friend from her past, Meghan Markle's life is a graveyard of abandoned allies. But the gala incident is different because she was caught red-handed by both her husband and her victim. The blocking of Catherine McPhee is a classic narcissistic tactic, the removal of the rival woman to ensure total dominance over the male source of influence. We saw it with the Princess of Wales, whom Meghan attempted to cast as the villain in a story where she was the victim. We see it now with Catherine McPhee, a woman who did nothing but help her, only to be treated like an obstacle to her husband's Grammys and bank account. For the British and Commonwealth audience, this serves as a final dark confirmation. The skepticism toward Meghan has never been about her nationality or her race, it has been about her character. It has been about the observation that she treats people like rungs on a ladder. To see her allegedly hitting on David Foster is the ultimate proof that the ladder is all she cares about. She was willing to burn the most important connection Harry had left just for the chance to see if she could exert her influence over a more powerful man. Harry's position is now one of profound isolation. He is trapped in a marriage where his wife has allegedly been outed as a predator by the man he respected most in his new life. He has no family to turn to, no homeland to return to, and now, no mentor to guide him. He is left in a Montecito mansion with a woman who the rest of Hollywood is now afraid to invite to their homes. The red-handed flirtation at the gala was the moment the fairy tale died and was replaced by a sordid Hollywood drama. David Foster's alleged words, "Your wife is a whore," will likely echo in Harry's mind for the rest of his life. It is the kind of truth that cannot be unheard. It is the final verdict on the woman Harry sacrificed his life for. The gala was supposed to be a night of charity and celebration, but instead it was the night the mask was finally, permanently, and violently removed. Witnesses describe a duchess who was not playing the role of the devoted wife, but rather a woman hitting on the host with a focused intensity that left onlookers horrified. This wasn't merely a social faux pas. It was an aggressive attempt to undermine the very man who had provided her husband with a sense of stability in their new life. However, the most disturbing aspect of the night was the reported blocking of Catherine McPhee. Sources allege that Meghan spent the evening physically and socially positioning herself to exclude Catherine from her own husband's orbit. This tactic, marginalizing another woman to gain unfettered access to a man of power, is a hallmark of the Markle pattern. Catherine McPhee, the woman who had welcomed Meghan into her home and defended her against the world's scrutiny, was suddenly being treated like a social irrelevance in her own backyard. It was a cold-blooded display of dominance that signaled the end of any genuine friendship between the two women. The evening reached its breaking point when Prince Harry, reportedly alerted to the uncomfortable atmosphere in the room, confronted David Foster about his wife's behavior. Harry, who has famously lived in a state of hyper-defensiveness regarding Meghan, likely expected a polite deflection. Instead, he was met with the blunt, unvarnished honesty of a man who had seen too much. David Foster, a man who has managed the biggest stars in history and has nothing to lose by speaking the truth, reportedly delivered a verdict that was as vulgar as it was devastating. He allegedly told the prince, "Your wife is a whore. She tried to get me to sleep with her." Those words represent the total incineration of the Sussexes' social credibility. To be told by a mentor, a man you consider a second father, that your wife has actively propositioned him at a charity event is a level of humiliation that transcends the reach of any PR damage control. It explains the reports that Harry abandoned Meghan at the gala, fleeing the event in a state of visceral shock. For the first time, the man who had burned every bridge to London was forced to see that the person he was protecting was the very person he should have been protected from. The red-handed nature of the incident meant there was no way to spin the narrative. The truth was right there in the room, witnessed by the elite of the industry. This is the real reason why the Fosters and the Sussexes have experienced a total cessation of contact. There was no drifting apart or busy schedules. There was only a total, scorched-earth termination of a relationship that had become toxic. Catherine McPhee, who had been Meghan's bridge to the Hollywood A-list, was reportedly left stunned by the betrayal. To be blocked and then have your husband propositioned by the person you helped is a wound that never heals. The Fosters didn't just stop calling, they reportedly made it known that the Sussexes were no longer welcome in their world, effectively blacklisting them from the highest levels of North American philanthropy. The Markle pattern is now a matter of public record: arrival, extraction, attempted dominance, and eventual disposal. We saw it with the royal family, we saw it with Jessica Mulroney, and we see it now with the Fosters. Meghan seems to view other women as competitors to be neutralized, rather than allies to be cherished. Her alleged attempt to hit on David Foster, while his wife stood by, is the ultimate proof of a woman who values influence over loyalty and ego over friendship. She was willing to gamble the most stable relationship Harry had left for a moment of perceived social triumph. For the public in the UK and the Commonwealth, this story is the final, grim confirmation of their long-held suspicions. The skepticism toward Meghan has never been about her background. It has been about her character. It has been about the observation that she treats relationships as disposable assets. To see her allegedly targeting David Foster is the final proof that for Meghan Markle, the hustle never stops, even when the person being hustled is a friend. She was caught red-handed not by the paparazzi, but by the people who actually tried to love and support her. Prince Harry now finds himself in a position of total isolation. He has no family to go back to, no country to call home, and now no surrogate father to guide him through the shark-infested waters of his new life. He is left in his Montecito fortress with a woman whom the elite are now terrified to invite to their homes. The red-handed flirtation at the gala was the moment the fairy tale died. and was replaced by a tawdry Hollywood scandal. David Foster's alleged words, "Your wife is a whore," will likely haunt Harry as long as he remains in this marriage. He was the surrogate father Harry desperately needed. But for Meghan, power is a zero-sum game, and loyalty is often just a temporary convenience. According to sources embedded within the gala's guest list, the Duchess decided that the charity event was the perfect stage to test her influence on the man who held all the keys. Witnesses describe a night where Meghan allegedly ignored the husband she supposedly moved mountains for, focusing instead on David Foster, with a hitting on intensity that was as transparent as it was inappropriate. But the most damning reports involve the treatment of Catherine McPhee. Multiple accounts suggest that Meghan spent the evening blocking Catherine, using her physical presence and social weight to literally push McPhee out of conversations with her own husband. This wasn't just a social gaffe, it was an attempt to assert dominance over a woman who had been her most vocal supporter. To block a host and a friend while simultaneously attempting to seduce her husband is a level of social aggression that the Hollywood elite rarely see out in the open. It was a calculated move to replace the wife as the primary influence in Foster's life, a move that backfired with spectacular public force. The climax of this drama didn't happen in a whispered corner. It exploded when Harry, reportedly humiliated by his wife's behavior, confronted Foster. The prince, who has spent years functioning as Meghan's primary enabler, likely expected a polite clarification. What he received was a verbal evisceration. David Foster is a man of immense stature who has spent a lifetime dealing with divas and manipulators. He reportedly saw exactly what Meghan was doing and decided that Harry needed to hear the truth, no matter how much it burned. Foster allegedly told the prince, "Your wife is a whore. She tried to get me to sleep with her." The gravity of that statement sink in. This isn't a headline from a tabloid or a quote from an anonymous royal source in London. This is a man who was the Sussex's primary benefactor, reportedly using the most derogatory terms possible to describe the Duchess's character to her own husband. It is a moment of total, irreversible collapse. For Harry, the man who gave up 1,000 years of tradition to protect this woman, to be told by his mentor that she had tried to solicit him, is a psychological blow from which there is no recovery. It explains why Harry reportedly abandoned Meghan at the gala, leaving her to face the cold stares of the room alone. The man who had been her shield finally realized that he was being used as a cloak for her ambitions. The resulting silence from the Foster-McPhee camp has been the loudest part of this story. There were no amicable statements about moving in different directions. There was only an immediate, total blackout. In the world of high-stakes philanthropy, you can be many things, but you cannot be the woman who tries to dismantle a benefactor's marriage in front of a room full of donors. The red-handed flirtation became the defining image of the night, and it has turned the Sussexes into social pariahs in the very circles they need most. David Foster and Catherine McPhee didn't just end a friendship. They reportedly signaled to the rest of the A-list that the Sussexes were a liability. The Markle pattern is a cycle of arrival, exploitation, and incineration. From the royal family to the Mulroneys and now to the Fosters, the trail of wreckage is consistent. Meghan seems to treat every relationship as a ladder and every person as a rung. The moment she felt she could bypass Catherine McPhee and go straight to the source of power, David Foster, she took her shot. She ignored the fact that Catherine had been her friend and that David had been Harry's father figure. For Meghan, the acquisition of power justifies the betrayal of trust. But in David Foster, she met a man who refused to be part of the script. The British public has long maintained that Meghan Markle's victim narrative was a cover for a much more predatory ambition. They saw how she isolated Harry from the Windsors, and now they see her allegedly trying to isolate a husband from his wife in Hollywood. The skepticism was never about where she came from. It was about where she was going and who she was willing to step on to get there. To be caught red-handed, hitting on a friend's husband, is the ultimate proof that the mask of the humanitarian was always just a performance.